You think loyalty and hard work guarantee success, I did too. Until that Monday morning when my name vanished from every report, every meeting invite, every project dashboard. 6 years of being the backbone of our infrastructure, erased like I'd never existed. They thought I was legacy replaceable by the CEO's young, beautiful protege who'd stolen my work to land a $184 million contract. But they didn't know I held the keys. 3 simple questions would bring their empire crashing down before the board's very eyes. My name is Vanessa Hale. And at 36, I'd built something I thought was unshakable at Northpoint Dynamics. 6 years of architecting solutions that kept our SaaS platform running like clockwork. 6 years of being the one they called at 3 in the morning when servers crashed. 6 years of loyalty that I wore like armor. That Monday started like any other. Coffee at 7:30, inbox scan at 7:45, prep for the 9 o'clock executive sync. Except when I opened the calendar invite, my name wasn't there. Not moved to optional, not accidentally left off, surgically removed. I refreshed the page 3 times. Same result. The weekly architecture review I'd been leading for 4 years. My name replaced with TBD, the Q3 roadmap presentation. I'd spent 2 weeks preparing reassigned to someone called Maya Briggs. My fingers trembled slightly as I scrolled through my inbox. No explanation, no heads up from my manager, just a growing void where my responsibilities used to live. The walk to the conference room felt longer than usual. Each step echoed in the hallway like a countdown. When I pushed open the glass door, the conversation died instantly. 14 pairs of eyes turned toward me, then quickly away, as if I'd become suddenly radioactive. Elliot Vance sat at the head of the table, our new CEO, barely 32 with that Silicon Valley swagger that mistakes disruption for innovation. His Italian suit probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Beside him sat a woman I'd never seen before. Early 30s, immaculate blazer, the kind of calculated beauty that belonged more on Instagram than in infrastructure meetings. "Vanessa," Elliot said, his smile sharp as broken glass. "I wasn't sure you'd make it." I took my usual seat, third from the left, directly across from the architecture diagrams I'd created, except they weren't mine anymore. The slides on screen showed my framework, my logic flow, my system design, but the author field read Maya Briggs, Strategic Solutions Architect. As I was saying, Elliot continued, his eyes never leaving mine, we need to modernize our approach. Legacy systems and legacy thinking are holding us back from true transformation. Legacy, the word hung in the air like a diagnosis. Around the table, the younger engineers shifted uncomfortably. These were people I'd mentored, whose code reviews I'd guided, whose careers I'd helped build. Now they looked at me like I was already a ghost. Maya spoke up, her voice honeyed confidence. The infrastructure redesign I'm proposing will position us perfectly for the government contract. I've identified several inefficiencies in our current setup that we can optimize. Our current setup, the one I'd built from scratch, the one that had maintained 99.9% uptime for 3 consecutive years. I opened my laptop, fingers steady now despite the rage building in my chest, while Maya presented my work with surgical precision, removing my fingerprints from every component. I did what I'd always done. I observed, I documented, I noticed things others missed. Like how Maya's laptop showed recent access logs to files that required my personal credentials. Like how Elliot's hand briefly touched her shoulder when he leaned over to point at something on screen. Like how the CFO kept glancing between them with the knowing look of someone watching a predetermined play unfold. "Any questions?" Maya asked, looking directly at me. I had hundreds, but I knew better than to ask them here, in this room that had already chosen sides. Instead, I smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't reach your eyes. "Just one," I said quietly. "Who approved the credential transfer for the core repository access?" Maya's confident expression flickered for just a moment. Elliot jumped in smoothly. "We're streamlining access management. More details to come." The meeting continued for another 40 minutes. They discussed my systems like I wasn't there, planned changes to my architecture like I'd already been erased. I took notes in my private encrypted folder, the one they didn't know existed, the one that logged every access attempt, every modification, every digital fingerprint left behind. When the meeting ended, I was the last to leave. As I gathered my things, I heard Elliot's voice from the hallway. Not quite low enough. "She's done. Give it 2 weeks. She'll quit on her own." I closed my laptop gently. They thought they'd deleted me from the story. They had no idea I was just beginning to write my own ending. Maya Briggs wasn't just beautiful. She was strategic about it, the kind of woman who knew exactly which angle made her cheekbones catch the light during video calls, whose LinkedIn headshot looked like a Fortune 500 CEO portrait. Within days of her arrival, she'd colonized the executive floor like she'd always belonged there. I started noticing patterns. Maya's calendar synced perfectly with Elliot's. Late evening strategy sessions that ended at 11 at night. Early morning prep meetings that started at 6:30 in the morning. The facilities manager mentioned seeing Elliot's Tesla in the garage on weekends, always parked next to Maya's white Mercedes. But it was Wednesday when the real theft began. I was debugging a client issue when an alert popped up on my monitoring dashboard. Someone was accessing my project folders, specifically the ones containing the specifications for the Department of Energy contract. $184 million worth of government infrastructure modernization. 18 months of my life condensed into technical documents, architectural diagrams, and compliance frameworks. The access log showed Maya's credentials, but the behavior pattern was wrong. She was downloading everything, not reading, not reviewing, just bulk copying, like someone stuffing jewelry into a bag during a heist. I watched in real time as she pulled my documentation into her local drive. The audit specifications I'd spent 3 months perfecting with federal compliance officers, the security architecture that had passed 4 separate government reviews, the scalability models I'd tested across 17 different scenarios. 20 minutes later, she was presenting her preliminary findings to the executive team. "I've identified a revolutionary approach to the federal requirements," Maya announced in the glass-walled boardroom. I could see her through the transparent walls, my specifications displayed on the screen behind her, my words coming out of her mouth. The younger developers started calling me Compliance Carol after that meeting. They'd snicker when I insisted on following security protocols, roll their eyes when I mentioned documentation standards. "That's such legacy thinking," Brad from DevOps said loud enough for me to hear. "Maya says we need to be more agile, more innovative." Maya says, as if she'd ever written a line of production code in her life. I pulled her background that night. USC business degree, 2 years at a consulting firm that went under, 6 months at a startup that never launched. Her technical certifications were all entry-level, completed in the last 3 months. Her GitHub account had 12 commits, all README updates. But her Instagram told a different story. Charity galas, tech conferences, yacht parties in Marina del Rey, and starting 4 months ago, increasingly frequent appearances of a familiar figure in the background, Elliot Vance, sometimes with his wedding ring visible, sometimes without. The most damning evidence came from an unlikely source, Raj from IT, who still remembered when I'd fought to get his visa sponsorship approved, quietly forwarded me a ticket. Maya had requested admin access to the core repository. Citing CEO authorization, the ticket was approved in 4 minutes. Normal approval time was 72 hours minimum. "She doesn't even know what a Docker container is," Raj whispered when we passed in the hallway. "Yesterday she asked me why we need so many databases when Excel exists." But Elliot had made his choice clear. In the all-hands meeting that Friday, he stood behind Maya as she presented the transformation roadmap, my roadmap, with buzzwords sprinkled on top like glitter on a kindergarten project. "Maya brings exactly the kind of fresh perspective we need," Elliot announced, his hand resting on her shoulder a beat too long. "She's not constrained by how things have always been done." The subtext was clear. I was the constraint. That afternoon, I found my desk relocated, not fired, not formally demoted, just moved to the basement level, next to the server room. Space optimization, HR explained with a sympathetic smile that didn't reach her eyes. I sat in my new windowless office, listening to the hum of servers I'd configured, surrounded by the infrastructure I'd built. They thought they'd buried me. They didn't realize they'd just given me unrestricted physical access to the very heart of the system. I opened my private repository and began documenting everything. Every unauthorized access, every copied file, every specification Maya claimed as her own. The trail was digital breadcrumbs, but I was building a whole bakery. Because Maya might have stolen my work, but she'd never understood it. She was wearing my architecture like a costume, speaking my words like a script. And when the time came for her to perform without the script, when the Department of Energy asked the deep questions only I knew the answers to, her beautiful mask would crack. I just had to make sure I was there to watch it shatter. The executive strategy offsite was held at Timberline Lodge, a luxury resort nestled in the Oregon mountains. I wasn't invited. Of course, legacy systems don't need strategy, apparently, but I'd been handling the IT logistics for these retreats for years, which meant I still had access to the booking system, the room assignments, the conference schedule. I drove up Friday evening, checked in under the corporate account I'd set up years ago for vendor meetings. My room was on the 3rd floor, directly above the executive conference suite. Pure coincidence, really. At 9:45 that night, I stepped onto my balcony for fresh air. The executive team's voices drifted up through the conference room's open windows below. Elliot's laugh cut through the mountain silence, followed by the distinctive pop of champagne. To Maya. His voice carried clearly in the thin mountain air. To transformation. The clink of glasses, then Elliot's voice again, lower but still audible. Thompson from the board called today. He's concerned about Vanessa. What did you tell him? That was Richard, our CFO. The truth, that she's become a bottleneck, that she's holding on to outdated methods while Maya's ready to revolutionize our entire approach. And the DOE contract? Richard asked. Maya's presenting Tuesday. Once she lands it, Vanessa becomes irrelevant. We'll offer her a severance package. Make it clean. Maya's voice, soft but certain. She won't fight it. People like her never do. Too much pride in being professional. She's finished, Elliot said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. 18 months from now, no one will even remember she built this system. It'll all be Maya's innovation story. Someone must have noticed the open windows because they suddenly closed. But I'd heard enough. I went back to my room and opened my laptop, started digging deeper into the contracts, the legal frameworks, the documentation I'd signed over the years. That's when I found it, buried in subsection 7.4b of an intellectual property agreement from 3 years ago. The clause was beautiful in its simplicity. Any core system modifications required authorization from the original architect, me, or ownership would revert to the architect's designated entity. Elliot had signed it himself, probably without reading it, back when he needed my expertise to fix a critical system failure. I'd incorporated an LLC 2 years ago for freelance work, VH Technical Solutions. It had been sitting dormant, waiting. Now it had a purpose. I pulled up the system architecture, examining my own creation like a surgeon planning an operation. The orchestration framework was the heart of everything. It controlled data flow, managed permissions, validated compliance. I'd built it modular, scalable, bulletproof. And I'd built it with a failsafe. Not malicious code. I wasn't a criminal. Just elegant compliance logic that verified ownership and authorization at the kernel level. If someone tried to modify the core framework without proper credentials, the system would protect itself by entering dormant compliance mode, still functional, but locked down, waiting for the rightful owner to unlock it. I'd documented this feature extensively 3 years ago, buried it in the technical specifications that no one except me had ever fully read. Maya certainly hadn't. She'd only skimmed the executive summaries. Saturday morning, I saw them at breakfast. Maya wore athletic wear that looked like it had never seen a gym. Her hand occasionally brushing Elliot's arm as they discussed strategic synergies. His wedding ring was absent. "Vanessa," Elliot said when he spotted me. His surprise quickly masked. "I didn't know you were here." "Vendor meeting," I replied smoothly. "The backup system providers. Someone needs to handle the technical details." Maya's smile was condescending. "Still worrying about backups. We're moving everything to the cloud. Much more efficient." "Of course," I said. "I'm sure you've reviewed the federal compliance requirements for cloud storage of classified infrastructure data." Her smile flickered. She hadn't. That afternoon, while they were in their strategy session, I made a few adjustments. Nothing that would trigger alerts, just activating dormant logging protocols, enabling ownership verification checks, setting up automated compliance validations. The system wouldn't change its behavior, not yet, but it would start watching, recording, preparing. I also placed a call to my lawyer, Elizabeth Hartley, explained the situation, the clause, the unauthorized modifications I was tracking. "You have them," she said after reviewing the documents. "If they modify that framework without your authorization, ownership reverts immediately. The DOE contract would be void." "I know," I said, watching Elliot and Maya through my window as they walked the resort grounds, her laugh carrying across the distance. "When do you want to act?" "When it will hurt the most," I replied. That would be Tuesday, the DOE presentation. $184 million on the line, the board watching, Maya presenting my work as her own. 3 questions would destroy them, and I would be the one asking them. Sunday night, I sat in my home office with 3 monitors glowing in the darkness. On the left, system logs streaming in real time. Center screen, the LLC documentation for VH Technical Solutions. On the right, the original framework code, my code, with copyright headers dated 3 years ago. Every function tagged with my digital signature. The beauty of my plan wasn't in its complexity, it was in its simplicity. I wasn't planting malware or creating backdoors. I was simply enforcing the legal ownership structure that already existed, that Elliot had already agreed to, that sat dormant in our production systems like a sleeping giant. The orchestration framework consisted of 12 core modules. Each module had embedded compliance triggers that verified ownership certificates before allowing modifications. For 3 years, these triggers had been passive, running their checks but never enforcing them. A single configuration change would wake them up. I remote accessed the basement server room system at 11:30 that night. My credentials still worked. They'd moved my desk but forgotten to revoke my physical access privileges. Sloppy. Or maybe they just assumed I was too professional to do anything about it. The modification took 4 minutes. I didn't change any functionality, didn't alter any business logic. I simply switched the compliance validation from log only to enforce. The system would now require proper authorization certificates for any core framework modifications. Without them, it would enter dormant compliance mode, fully functional for existing operations, but locked against changes. I created 3 authorization certificates, all registered to VH Technical Solutions, 1 for myself, 2 more stored in escrow with my lawyer. Then I encrypted the certificate generator with a key that would take quantum computers a century to crack. The next morning, Monday, I watched from my basement office as Maya's team began implementing her innovations. They started small, UI changes, surface-level optimizations. The system accepted these without complaint. They grew bolder, modifying API endpoints, adjusting data flows. At 2:15 in the afternoon, they hit the first core module. The error message was polite, almost apologetic. Modification requires ownership authorization. Please provide valid certificate. Brad from DevOps laughed it off. Probably some old validation check. Let me override it. Access denied. He tried his admin credentials. Access denied. He tried Elliot's executive override. Access denied. Must be a bug, he told Maya, who was hovering over his shoulder. I'll escalate to the senior architects. Except the senior architect was me, and I was officially too legacy to consult. They spent 3 hours trying to bypass it. Every attempt was logged, time-stamped, and automatically forwarded to my legal documentation folder. By 5:30, they gave up and decided to work around it. We'll address it after the DOE presentation. Maya decided the current system is functional enough for the demo. She didn't understand that she'd just triggered a countdown. Every unauthorized modification attempt added another entry to the compliance violation log. The system was building a legal case against them, one timestamp at a time. That evening, I refined my setup. I created what I called the lockbox, a kill switch that would trigger full dormant compliance mode across all 12 modules simultaneously. But it wouldn't be me who triggered it. The system would do it automatically if it detected specific patterns of unauthorized access during a critical operation, like, say, a live demonstration to government officials. I documented everything meticulously: the ownership structure, the authorization framework, the compliance requirements, 40 pages of technical specifications that proved, beyond any legal doubt, that VH Technical Solutions owned the core framework that Northpoint Dynamics depended on. Elizabeth, my lawyer, reviewed it that night. "This is ironclad," she said. "If they present this system as their property to the DOE, it's fraud. If they can't deliver because the system locks them out, it's breach of contract. Either way, they're finished." "And my position?" I asked. "Legally protected. You've done nothing wrong. You're simply enforcing existing contracts and ownership rights." I slept better that night than I had in weeks, not because I was vengeful, though I won't lie. There was satisfaction in it, but because I was finally in control again. They'd tried to erase me, to steal my work, to rewrite history with Maya as the hero. Tomorrow, during the DOE presentation, history would correct itself. The lockbox was armed, the documentation was filed, the certificates were secured. All that remained was to watch Maya try to demonstrate a system she didn't understand, running on framework she didn't own, making promises she couldn't keep. The board would ask their questions, I would provide the answers, and Elliot would learn that some systems can't be disrupted, especially when they're designed by someone you tried to bury in the basement. Tuesday morning arrived with the kind of crystalline clarity that makes you believe in fate. I arrived at the office at 7 in the morning, brewed coffee in my basement kitchenette, and pulled up the system monitoring dashboard. All green lights. The framework was running perfectly, waiting patiently for someone to trip its wires. At 8:30, Maya's team began their final demo preparations. I watched through the logs as they spun up test instances, ran through their slide deck, verified their connections. Brad was sweating already. I could tell from his frantic pattern of access attempts, trying to ensure nothing would go wrong. At 9:15, the first crack appeared. "The dashboard is lagging," someone reported in the development Slack channel I still had access to. "Just refresh it," Maya responded. "It's probably cache issues." But it wasn't cache issues. The system had detected unauthorized modifications to the visualization layer, changes Maya's team had pushed through without proper validation. The framework was starting to resist, like an immune system recognizing a foreign invader. By 10 in the morning, when the DOE officials were settling into the boardroom, the customer dashboards were freezing intermittently, not enough to crash, just enough to raise eyebrows. The API response times had increased from milliseconds to full seconds. "What's happening?" Maya hissed at Brad in the hallway. I could hear them from the server room next door. "I don't know. The system it's like it's checking something before every operation. Some kind of permission validation that wasn't there yesterday." "Can you fix it?" "Not without understanding what's triggering it. We need Vanessa." "We don't need her," Maya cut him off. "We'll manage." The demo began at 10:30. I watched from my basement monitor. Connected to the boardroom's presentation system through a maintenance feed no one remembered existed. Maya stood at the front, polished and confident in her navy suit, my architecture diagrams glowing on the screen behind her. "Northpoint Dynamics has developed a revolutionary framework," she began, the lie rolling smoothly off her tongue. "Our innovative approach to infrastructure orchestration will transform how government agencies manage their digital assets." The DOE officials, 3 stern-faced engineers and a procurement specialist, took notes silently. Board members lined the walls, including Thompson, who'd questioned my absence. Maya clicked to the live demo. "Let me show you our system in action." She logged into the dashboard. It loaded, slowly, each element appearing like it was being dragged through molasses. Maya's smile tightened. "We're experiencing slight network latency," she explained. "But as you can see, the system is robust enough to handle such variations." She navigated to the compliance reporting module. My module, the one I'd spent 4 months perfecting. The screen froze for 3 seconds, then displayed, "Permission verification in progress." "Is this normal?" asked one of the DOE engineers, a woman named Patricia, whom I'd worked with on the initial specifications. "Absolutely," Maya lied. "It's our enhanced security feature." She tried to generate a compliance report. The system thought about it, validated her request against ownership certificates it couldn't find, and finally produced a report with unverified modifications watermarked across every page. The room grew uncomfortably quiet. "Why does it say unverified?" Patricia asked. Maya's composure cracked slightly. That's just a development flag. Brad, can you—" Brad was frantically typing on his laptop, trying to SSH into the production servers. Each attempt was logged, time-stamped, and automatically flagged as unauthorized access attempt during critical operation. The system's immune response intensified. Dashboards began timing out. APIs returned 403 forbidden errors. The demonstration environment started displaying warnings, dormant compliance mode pending authorization. "Perhaps we should pause," Thompson suggested from his seat along the wall. "It seems there are technical issues that need to be resolved." No, Elliot stood up, his face flushed. "Maya, show them the scalability metrics." Maya clicked desperately through screens that loaded slower and slower, each one displaying subtle warnings she didn't understand. The system wasn't crashing. That would have been too obvious, too traceable to potential sabotage. It was simply refusing to cooperate with unauthorized users trying to claim ownership of something that wasn't theirs. "Your framework seems to have authentication issues," Patricia observed, her engineering background showing. "Who maintains the core ownership certificates?" Maya froze. She didn't even know what ownership certificates were. "Our senior architecture team handles that." Elliot jumped in. "Interesting," Thompson said slowly. "And who leads that team?" The silence that followed was deafening. Everyone knew the answer. Everyone knew who'd built this system, who understood every line of its code, who was sitting in the basement while her work was being stolen. Vanessa Hale. Richard, the CFO, finally admitted. "Then perhaps," Patricia suggested, "we should have Ms. Hale join us to address these technical issues." I was already walking up the stairs, my laptop under my arm, my authorization certificate loaded on a USB drive in my pocket. 3 years of patience, 2 weeks of planning, 5 minutes of watching them squirm. The lockbox was armed and ready. All it would take was 3 questions to detonate it. And I was about to walk into that boardroom and ask them. The boardroom fell silent as I entered. Maya's face drained of color. Elliot's jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle twitching. The DOE officials looked up with interest, particularly Patricia, who'd always appreciated straight talk over corporate theater. "Ms. Hale," Thompson acknowledged from his position along the wall, "we seem to be having technical difficulties with the system demonstration." "So I've observed," I said calmly, taking a seat at the far end of the table. I opened my laptop deliberately slowly, letting the tension build. "May I ask a few clarifying questions?" "We don't need," Elliot started. "Actually," Patricia interrupted, "I'd very much like to hear from the person who appears to be the actual system architect." I pulled up the ownership documentation on my laptop, projecting it to the secondary screen. The copyright notices, the architectural diagrams with my name embedded in the metadata, the Git commit history showing 3 years of my contributions. "My first question," I said, my voice steady as steel, "is quite simple. Who legally owns the orchestration framework that powers this entire system? The room held its breath. Maya looked at Elliot desperately. Elliot looked at Richard. Richard looked at the legal counsel, who was rapidly flipping through his tablet. The framework, the legal counsel began, his voice uncertain, would be owned by North Point Dynamics as work product created by employees. Interesting, I said, pulling up subsection 7.4b on screen. Then why does this contract, signed by Mr. Vance himself, specify that core framework modifications require authorization from the original architect, with ownership reverting to the architect's designated entity if violated? Elliot's face went from red to white. That was a temporary measure during a critical update. Temporary. I highlighted the date. 3 years seems rather permanent, and I see no expiration clause. Patricia leaned forward. Are you saying North Point doesn't own the system they're presenting to us? That brings me to my second question, I continued, pulling up the compliance logs. If the framework requires authorization certificates for modifications, and Ms. Briggs has been modifying it for the past week, where are her authorization certificates? Maya's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. We have administrative access. Administrative access and ownership authorization are different things, I explained patiently, as if teaching a freshman computer science class. One lets you use the system, the other lets you claim you built it. The DOE procurement specialist was taking rapid notes. This is a serious concern. We cannot award a contract for a system the vendor doesn't legally own. Which brings me to my third and final question, I said, standing now, walking to the main screen where the system warnings were still flashing. When the framework enters dormant compliance mode due to unauthorized modifications during a critical operation, like, say, a federal contract demonstration, who holds the reactivation keys? I pulled the USB drive from my pocket, holding it up so everyone could see it. Would anyone like to guess? You're sabotaging us, Elliot exploded, jumping to his feet. This is corporate espionage. No, I replied calmly. This is contract enforcement. Every modification attempt has been logged, every unauthorized access recorded, every violation documented. I haven't sabotaged anything. I've simply allowed the system to protect itself from theft. Thompson stood slowly. Mr. Vance, are you telling us that your strategic solutions architect has been presenting work she didn't create, for a system you don't own, to secure a federal contract worth $184 million? The legal counsel was white as a sheet. We need to discuss this internally. No, Patricia said firmly. We need answers now. Ms. Hale, can you prove ownership? I connected my laptop to the main screen, displaying the VH Technical Solutions Incorporation documents, the framework ownership certificates, the code repository with 3 years of detailed commit history. Furthermore, I added, I can demonstrate full control of the system. I inserted the USB drive into my laptop, typed a single command. Instantly, every warning on the screen cleared. The dashboards loaded smoothly. The APIs responded in milliseconds. How? Brad whispered from the corner where he'd been frantically debugging. Because I built it, I said simply. Every line of code, every architectural decision, every optimization that Ms. Briggs claimed as her innovation came from these hands. Maya stood abruptly, her composure finally shattered. This is ridiculous. Elliot, tell them. Tell them what? I asked. About your late-night strategy sessions, about how you gained access to my files, about how you've been presenting my work while calling me legacy. I turned to the board. I have 18 months of documentation, every design decision, every test result, every federal compliance requirement that Ms. Briggs wouldn't even know how to spell. The procurement specialist closed his notebook. I think we've seen enough. This contract cannot proceed under these circumstances. Wait, Elliot pleaded. We can resolve this, Vanessa. We can work out an arrangement. You already had an arrangement, I replied. It was called employment. You chose to violate it. Patricia stood, gathering her materials. Ms. Hale, VH Technical Solutions, was it? We'd be interested in discussing a direct contract with the actual system owner. The boardroom erupted, Elliot shouting about lawsuits, Maya fleeing the room, board members demanding explanations, Richard calculating the financial devastation. I remained calm in the chaos, packing my laptop slowly, savoring each moment. 6 years of loyalty dismissed, 2 weeks of humiliation, 1 morning of revenge served at exactly the right temperature. Thompson caught my arm as I headed for the door. "Masterfully done," he said quietly. "I'm just protecting what's mine," I replied. As I left, I heard Elliot screaming at legal counsel about finding loopholes. Good luck with that. I'd had 3 years to make it bulletproof. The $184 million contract was dead. Maya's reputation was destroyed, and Elliot was about to learn that some people you shouldn't bury. They might dig their way out. The meltdown was immediate and catastrophic. I stood in the hallway outside the boardroom, listening as Elliot's voice rose to a pitch I'd never heard before. "Fix it. I don't care how. Just fix it now." Brad's fingers flew across his keyboard, sweat beading on his forehead. "I'm trying, but the system won't accept any commands. It's like it's locked from the inside." On the main screen, a new message appeared. "Dormant compliance mode activated. Time to full shutdown, 9 minutes, 0 seconds. "What does that mean?" Thompson demanded. "It means," I said, stepping back into the room, "that the system has detected a critical ownership violation during a federal compliance event. It's protecting itself from fraudulent representation." 8 minutes, 50 seconds. "Turn it off," Elliot screamed at me. "You turn it off right now or I'll have you arrested." "For what?" I asked calmly. "Protecting my intellectual property, enforcing a contract you signed." Patricia from the DOE was on her phone, speaking rapidly to someone. "Yes, potential fraud. System ownership dispute. Recommend immediate suspension of all North Point federal contracts pending investigation." 8 minutes, 30 seconds. Maya reappeared in the doorway. Her perfect composure cracked like cheap foundation. "This is insane. I've been working on this for weeks." "Working on it." I laughed, actually laughed. "You mean copying my files? Changing the author tags? Adding buzzwords to documentation you don't understand?" "I improved it," she insisted desperately. "Really? Then explain to me how the orchestration framework handles Byzantine fault tolerance in distributed nodes." Silence. "What about the CAP theorem trade-offs in our consistency model?" More silence. "Can you even tell me what CAP stands for?" Maya's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Elliot put his hand on her shoulder, but she shrugged it off violently. 7 minutes, 15 seconds. The DevOps team was in full panic mode. I could see their Slack messages flying across Brad's secondary monitor. Database connections dropping. Customer APIs timing out. We're losing telemetry data. "Please." Richard, the CFO, approached me quietly. "What do you want?" "Money, your job back. A promotion." "I want what was mine all along," I replied. "Recognition, ownership, and the respect you should have shown before trying to erase me." 6 minutes, 0 seconds. Thompson stood up. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board, I motion for immediate termination of Elliot Vance as CEO for gross misconduct and potential fraud." "Seconded," said another board member immediately. "You can't do this," Elliot raged. "I transformed this company." "You transformed it into a liability," Thompson replied coldly. "Ms. Hale, what would it take to resolve this?" I pulled out a document from my laptop bag. Elizabeth, my lawyer, had prepared it that morning. Transfer of all framework rights to VH Technical Solutions, immediate payment of 18 months of back royalties for unauthorized use, and a public acknowledgement of the true architect of the system. 4 minutes, 45 seconds. "That's extortion," Elliot spat. "That's business," I corrected. "The same kind you tried to conduct when you thought you could steal my work." The system began its final descent. Customer dashboards went dark one by one, like city lights failing during a blackout. The main monitoring screen showed red alerts cascading through every service. 3 minutes, 30 seconds. "We'll lose everything," Brad said quietly, his face pale. "Every customer, every contract, the entire platform runs on this framework." "Then perhaps," I said, looking directly at Elliot, "you should have thought about that before trying to bury its architect in the basement." Maya was crying now, mascara running in black streams. "I didn't know. Elliot said it was company property, that Vanessa was just maintaining old code." Old code. I pulled up the Git statistics. I pushed 47 commits last week, fixed 16 critical bugs, optimized 3 major bottlenecks. While you were copying my documentation, I was ensuring the system you were trying to steal actually worked. 2 minutes, 0 seconds. The board was in emergency session, voices raised, fingers pointing. Patricia from the DOE was on a conference call with her superiors. The word fraud repeated multiple times. "Sign it." Thompson thrust the transfer documents at Elliot. "Sign it now or watch the company burn." 1 minute, 30 seconds. Elliot's hand shook as he took the pen. His signature was barely legible. Maya had disappeared entirely, fled like a thief when the lights come on. 1 minute, 0 seconds. "Authorization," I asked sweetly. "Authorized," Thompson confirmed, stamping the document with the board seal. 30 seconds. I inserted my USB drive, typed a command. The countdown froze at 15 seconds. Then, slowly, the red alerts began turning green. Services came back online. Dashboards flickered back to life. System ownership transferred to VH Technical Solutions. The screen displayed. Normal operations resumed. The room exhaled collectively. "Mr. Vance," Thompson said formally, "your resignation, effective immediately." Elliot stood there, destroyed. His empire crumbled in 9 minutes. The boy genius CEO who'd thought he could disrupt everything, including loyalty, integrity, and legal contracts. "This isn't over," he said to me, his voice hollow. "You're right," I agreed. "The FBI investigation into fraud against a federal agency is just beginning. I hope Maya kept good notes during those late-night strategy sessions. They'll make interesting reading for the prosecutors." He left without another word. The architect of nothing. Revealed at last. The system hummed peacefully, running my code, acknowledging its true owner. 9 minutes. That's all it took to destroy an empire built on lies. I'd built this system over 6 years. They'd tried to steal it in 2 weeks. The math never worked in their favor. The afternoon sun painted golden stripes across the riverfront cafe's wooden floor. I sat by the window, cappuccino cooling between my hands, watching Portland's afternoon traffic flow like a meditation. 3 days had passed since the boardroom confrontation. 3 days of beautiful silence. My phone buzzed occasionally, reporters wanting statements, former colleagues seeking gossip, competitors offering positions. I ignored them all. For the first time in 6 years, I had nowhere urgent to be, no crisis to solve, no system to save. The cafe door chimed. I didn't look up until a shadow fell across my table. Ms. Hale Richard, the former CFO, stood there looking 10 years older than he had on Tuesday. "May I?" I gestured to the empty chair. He sat heavily, ordered a black coffee, then stared at his hands. "The board appointed me interim CEO," he said finally. "Thompson insisted, said I was the only executive not implicated in the situation." I sipped my cappuccino, waiting. Elliot's under federal investigation. Maya disappeared completely. Her apartment's empty. Phone disconnected. The company lost 40% of its value in 2 days. He paused. "We need you back." "No," I said simply. "Please, hear me out. Full restoration, CTO position, double your previous salary, complete autonomy over technical decisions." "Richard," I interrupted gently, "I own the framework. Northpoint is now my client, not my employer. I'll honor the existing service agreement, ensure stability for the employees who had nothing to do with this, but I'll never work there again." He nodded slowly, defeated but understanding. The DOE. We're negotiating directly. Patricia's team appreciates working with someone who actually understands the technology. My phone buzzed. A text from the DOE procurement specialist. Contract approved. 184 MS. Congratulations. I didn't show Richard the message. He'd find out soon enough when the announcement went public. For what it's worth, Richard said, standing to leave. I'm sorry. We all saw what was happening. No one spoke up. Silence is a choice, I replied. You all chose. He left without another word, shoulders bent under the weight of consequences. I turned back to the window, watching the sun sink lower over the river. My reflection stared back. 36 years old, technically unemployed, and wealthier than I'd ever imagined. But it wasn't about the money. It had never been about the money. Another buzz. This time, an email from Raj in IT. Heard you're hiring for VH Technical Solutions. I know 12 engineers who'd follow you anywhere. The good ones. The ones who remember who really built this place. I smiled. Typing back, send me their resumes. The empire I'd built at North Point wasn't the framework or the systems. It was the knowledge, the expertise, the understanding of how to build something from nothing. They'd tried to take that from me. Not understanding it lived in my mind, not their servers. A young woman at the next table was typing furiously on her laptop, code scrolling across her screen. She reminded me of myself 6 years ago. Hungry, brilliant, naive about corporate politics. She glanced up, caught me looking. You're Vanessa Hale, she said, eyes wide. Everyone in tech is talking about what you did, how you protected your work. I did what I had to do, I said. My boss keeps trying to claim credit for my algorithms, she admitted quietly. I've been documenting everything, like you did. Good, I said. But here's the real lesson. Don't wait for them to bury you before you dig your way out. Own your work from day one. Make it impossible for them to erase you. She nodded eagerly, then hesitated. Did you plan it, the whole thing? I thought about the question. Had I planned for Elliot's betrayal, Maya's theft, the systematic erasure of my contributions? I planned for the possibility that someone would try to take what was mine, I said finally. The best protection isn't revenge. It's making yourself indispensable while maintaining independence. They confused the two. That was their mistake. The sun had set now, the cafe lights creating warm pools of amber. I finished my cappuccino, left a generous tip, and walked out into the Portland evening. My phone showed 17 missed calls from Elliot. I blocked the number and dropped the phone back in my pocket. Somewhere in the city, North Point Dynamics was scrambling to survive. Maya was probably on a plane to somewhere far away. Elliot was meeting with lawyers, trying to salvage something from the wreckage. And I was free to build something new, something entirely mine, something no one could ever take away. The framework would run smoothly tonight, tomorrow, for years to come. It would do what I'd designed it to do, serve its users, protect its integrity, and remember its architect. They'd thought they could rewrite the code without understanding it. But some things are written too deep to erase. Some architects build more than just systems. They build legacies that survive every attempt at demolition. Thank you for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're hearing this. Are you commuting to work, relaxing at home, or perhaps coding late into the night like I used to? Please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts below. Have you ever had to stand up for your work against those who tried to steal it? Let's discuss in the comments.